I've got another dream that I'd like to go through with you. This one I've entitled a demonic theme park because of the main themes of this whole dream. So, how it actually starts off is where we are on a big grass green area. Quite nearby me, there is a big grass area where there's actually a quite an oldish church. I'm not really sure how old it is actually, but it's on the opposite side of a big open green grass area. So this church actually exists. It's quite an old looking sort of church, but in this dream, the dream was a little bit different. Where obviously you had this church, in front of it was the big grass area, which there is in reality, but there was no roads around it where there is now. No paths, no houses, no nothing like that. And there's not really much in the way of houses around there at the moment. But so we're opposite this this church that does actually exist. But it's actually me and my mum. So we go to church regularly, and we were just checking out this church just to see what it was like. It was one we'd never visited before. We went in. It looked like a very, again, similar to the opposite. It looked like a very traditional looking church, unlike the kind of church I go to, which is quite modern. And yeah, we walked in. We had a very brief conversation with somebody outside. Somebody was just sort of sitting outside. We had a brief chat with them. Walked in. Kind of got ourselves sort of seated. Maybe I think we just had a little bit of a look around first, but we just went through a standard service. And the service there was, again, a lot more traditional. So they had like choir boys all singing. It was all hymns, and it was a very, what's the word? Kind of quite lifeless. Didn't feel that there was any kind of spirit there whatsoever. It was, it's almost like people going through the motions. Every Sunday they're just going through, listening to some songs. Guy kind of talking through some preaching, but there was no excitement. As I said, there was no spirit to it whatsoever. It felt like very much felt like tradition over any kind of substance. Anyway, so it came to the end, and there's choir boys there. As I said, there was a mixture of men, women, children, all kind of milling around. I think there's like candles and stuff like that. It was very dimly lit, and the service came to an end, and we both left. And as we were leaving, I noticed that there was a priest. Wearing like a traditional, Roman Catholic one with the dog collar on and all that sort of stuff. And he was looking to get our feedback. Because we'd been kind of welcomed, when we came in as to a new face. We were quite obviously a new face to this church, which was quite good, obviously, because you can get churches, I suppose, that maybe don't do that. I mean, I've only been to 2 churches really, and they were both quite welcoming. But we had a very brief chat, but we kind of really knew it just wasn't for us. It wasn't going to be the sort of place for us. But it was a really lovely day. Lovely sort of like spring, summer. Blue sky, lovely fluffy clouds, and a nice warm day. So me and my mum decided we were just going to have a little bit of a walk around the area. As I said, it's all grassy, so we kind of walked around the back of this church, and there was kind of just sort of small hills, sort of hilly area that kind of concealed a lot of what was around there. So we thought we'd just go and have a little bit of an exploration around the area. And that area at the moment is all urban, it's all just all housing, estates and stuff like that. But in this dream it wasn't. This was like a railway line and stuff like that. Again, none of that was there in this dream. But we wandered around the back and we were just having a little look around. And as we were just sort of casually chatting to each other as we were walking through the grass and the wildlife and stuff like that, we saw a plane go over, but it was really low. It was only probably about 100, 200 feet, maybe something like that. Probably 152. No, yeah, about 100 to 200 feet, I would have thought, roughly. And it was a jet. It was a passenger jet. It was just like your standard sort of passenger jet. You'd go, on like a relative, like a long haul sort of things, like 747, 767, something like that. But it didn't really make that much noise. The noise that you heard was actually from the people. So, which sounds bizarre, obviously, immediately. So with this particular jet that was going past, and it was going past at the speed really of a propeller plane. It was going quite slow. Certainly the sort of stalling speed easily, for a jet. And yeah, so it's going past very, very slowly. And on the outside of this jet, where you would see all the windows, there was actually people strapped on the outside of this plane, like roped on the outside, which was really bizarre, really, really bizarre. And they were sort of screaming and shouting and stuff like that, but it was more like a kind of excitement, like when you go to a theme park and you hear of people screaming and stuff, because you're going to a theme park, they're screaming out of the rides rather than out of true terror. And that's what this was. It was just that kind of screaming, and we were just sort of taken aback by thinking how bizarre it was that this plane was going by. Anyway, we carried on walking in the same sort of direction, but this jet had sort of come past us, and it was circling around behind us and stuff like that. But after we'd sort of looked at it, stared at it for a bit, we just carried on walking. And as we carried on walking, we went kind of round one hill that went into another hill, and as we kind of turned around this hill, it just all opened up, where everything had been concealed by all these different hills around the area. It all then just opened up into a kind of a deeper bit that went down maybe about sort of like 40 feet or something like that, where there's a bit more of a flat area. And inside, well, as we got around that corner, there was like a sign. It was a theme park, not a massive theme park, quite a smallish one. But we thought, okay, well, let's just check this out. This is a bit weird. Didn't know that this was around the area at all. And so we just wandered down into this area. So we were looking around, and we were seeing, where the plane bit must have been for we were seeing all typical theme park things you would see, sort of roped off queues for people where they're queuing up. There's loads of people queuing up for that plane thing. And other rides that I wasn't really paying too much attention to. The thing that caught my eye was more on the right hand side. And so as we walked in, just on our immediate right, as it kind of swept around a bit, there was something that didn't seem to really have much of a queue. And we had a look at that, and that was it was like a haunted house kind of thing, but it's really big. I mean, it was multiple stories. It would easily have been 4 or 5 stories high, at least, very wide. It looked like it had a kind of Addams Family kind of look to it, so it was all very dark woods, really run down, all wooden made. Looked like it was sort of like 1700s, 1800s sort of thing. That kind of thing. Anyway, so massive big gates, and we walked in through the gates, and got into this house thing, and inside you were kind of welcomed, and there was other people all around, which were actors who were basically in this place as part of the theme of this whole thing. So all people dressed up in kind of like period outfits, I guess, of that kind of time. There was, and they were all just mixing with people, talking to people, interacting with them, and it was almost like an interactive museum in a way, because you had lots of different bits that you were kind of looking at that were in glass boxes and things like that were showing stuff off. And we were wandering around for a little bit, and it wasn't really very exciting, so you could kind of see why there wasn't much of a queue. And as we were wandering around, we were noticing there was just slightly odd things about these actors, these actresses, that were kind of entertaining people. They just looked a bit odd. There was, I don't know, there was something about them that you'd look at them and you'd think, they just, not that they don't look human, they did look human, but you just got a sense of there's something not quite right with it. There was a mixture of people, so men, women, really, really short people as well. Again, I don't really get that. And there was one bit as well where there was a guy who was dressed up like a hotel bellboy, so wearing like a red top with all the buttons and things and a little cap on, but he had a face of a fish, which was really weird, and it started to give me that real kind of like Hotel Transylvania kind of vibe to it, but in real life rather than obviously a cartoony kind of scenario. But I said to my mum, look, let's just get out of it. There's something not quite right about this. This doesn't feel right. And so we were wandering off around this place trying to find a way out. We'd got in, but we'd wandered around for so long. This place was like a maze. That we were just looking for some kind of signs, some way of actually being able to get out. And there was lots of doors everywhere, but they were just going to another room. But then that room didn't have a door other than the door you just came through to get out. So you were kind of always looking for some sort of a route to get out, but you were just going from room to room to room, having a little bit of an explore around there and then go somewhere else. But there didn't seem to be anything. Or you'd open the door and it would just, there wouldn't be anything there. It was like a prop door. And it took absolutely ages until we found somewhere. But in that wandering around, we're saying to people, look, you need to find a way out of here. There's something not right going on. There's something about these actors and actresses that it seems very, very odd to me. I'd recommend you leave here. And they were just like, carried on, didn't pay any attention whatsoever. They didn't see anything wrong with anybody. We were the only ones suspicious. We were the only ones who thought there was something a bit dodgy going on, and that we were almost being entertained to keep us there, and that we were being deceived in some way. That's what it definitely felt like for sure. And so after quite a long time of us actually looking around trying to find a way out, we eventually found a way out. There was one door, it opened up, and then we saw this this kind of path, but it was more like a bridge. So it was because we opened the door and you could see out. You could see a little bit of I guess a little bit of the sky, a little bit of stuff through there, so we knew it was a way out. And so as we were walking along this bridge, it was super narrow. It was about just as wide as your hips, and your 2 feet next to each other. It wasn't any wider than that. And my initial thing when I looked at it, I thought, it looks like a rope bridge, because it kind of sort of not necessarily dipped, but it kind of went. It sort of dipped just a touch and then went up and up and up, and I could see that it was going over and attaching to a higher up hill area. And so it was a little bit of an incline as we were going up, but we knew we could see it just looked like it was the only way out that we could find. And as I said, I thought it was a rope bridge, and this was because of the there was loads of kind of like vines. I'd sort of describe them like vines. They weren't sort of thorny necessarily, but they were. I kind of described them immediately after the dream, almost like like a willow tree has quite their branches. They're quite thick, but they're also quite wiry and stuff like that. So they were kind of like that, and they were kind of surrounding this bridge. So it kind of gave it sides where it didn't really have sides, but it kind of looked like the supporting ropes that you would see on a rope bridge, because of all of these, and I was getting kind of tangled up on them as I was going through and walking along. So, and we managed. As it was quite a long way out. I mean, this bridge was probably 75 feet, 100 feet. Actually, no, a lot longer. No, so more like 100 meters. 100 meters. So it was quite a big distance out. Bit of a long trek through this, kind of thing, clambering over all of these vines and things like that were kind of completely overgrowing this exit. And we got out. We finally got out, and we realised that we were at the top of the hill bit, just before, if you remember, where that whole hill area opened up. So we'd kind of must have been, when we came in, the exit must have been out of sight, but just slightly over to our right, and that's where we came out the top of this hill. And we just kind of, after we got off, we kind of wandered around, and we're like, we're back to the beginning of this theme park thing. And weirdly, we walked back in, and then we saw this plane go over again. And this plane when it went over this time was completely different. So people weren't strapped to the outside at all. They were actually properly mechanically now attached, with proper safety harnesses and everything. It was much safer. And that was basically how that dream ended. Now this dream, I realised I didn't actually tell you when this dream was. It was back on the 20th of December 2024. So going back quite a way now. Bearing in mind it's August 2025. But the initial thoughts about it afterwards was, what is that dream trying to tell me? That was my kind of initial thoughts, and what my impression was that the people in the theme park, us, was representative of kind of like the world, and that we were being entertained. We were being entertained to keep us busy, to keep us distracted, and to not really be aware that this world was being run by demons. So all of these people all these things that were in costumes were actually just, demons in human skin, I suppose. I don't know how you describe it. They were basically just hiding and entertaining us just to keep us busy. So that was the kind of initial thoughts about it. And then when it came to obviously the path itself, was what I was kind of struck by was the fact that how overgrown the path was, and what was made kind of obvious to us was that was the exit queue to that actual ride. So it showed you that nobody else was getting out. Like, everybody was going in and being entertained in this little haunted house place, but nobody was getting out, because otherwise it would have been maintained, wouldn't it? A standard exit to any ride would be maintained. This was not maintained in any way. It was completely, kind of left to be overgrown. So what it sort of told us was, no one's getting out. Absolutely everybody's trapped. Everybody goes in, is trapped, and everybody around this theme park is completely oblivious to the fact that this ride is a trap, and it is trapping everybody who goes in. Nobody is escaping. And you guys are all having fun, on these rides, and again, you're just being entertained to death. Eventually you're going to go on that ride, because you're exploring all these rides. That's the ride. That's the end. That ends everybody. So the bit about the exit queue that made me think, and this took a little while before I actually thought about this, because there was dreams since. And I noticed a correlation between quite a few different dreams. This was probably one of the first of my series of bridge dreams. This was the very first, I think, and I had probably about another 4 or 5 over the months and months and months that I was kind of recording all of these dreams. But yeah, I won't go into that because this will kind of feature as a little bit in a bridge trilogy, not trilogy. I think it's about 4 or 5 dreams actually, but it'll be to do with that. But what I got from this was that was the exit path was, and you probably already know it, the narrow path. This is the narrow path. It's wide enough for just one person. All you're following is Jesus. You're walking in his footsteps. That's the narrow path, and that's the path that we were walking, trying to get out. There was obviously thorns and thistles that say, what is that? I wrote that down here. I wrote that down. Where did I write that? Yeah, Matthew 13:3-8, and then again I think it is Matthew 13:18-23, where it talks about the thorns and thistles. It's the parable, isn't it, of the seeds? The seeds that grow up in fertile soil. They're the ones where the word of God is welcomed, and it's good ground. It's good ground for it. It grows. A good crop, let's say. Whereas you have the seeds that are thrown on the path, who get snapped up by birds, and that's obviously Satan taking away their faith from them. You get the faith, obviously, of the seed that goes down and into rocky ground, and obviously it's very shallow earth. So the seed springs up in loving, really, really excited about everything, but there's no root. So it then dies in the sun. So when it's tested, that person is tested, then because they have no root, they've got no solid foundation, then they fall away. They can't grow. And then you've got the last one, which is, I think it's the last one. There might have been another one, but I think that's the last one. Is the ones who who land in thorns and thistles. So that's the representative, of course, of the being bogged down in this life, all the riches, the fame, all of these kind of things that take you away, and you're kind of overshadowed by all these things, and you can't grow through, because of that. You can't grow into the Christian that you really wanted to be. So then, yeah, obviously, so as I said, this represented a narrow path. The thorns and thistles were getting on our way, but we were just getting through them, which is good. Good to see that. Hopefully, if that was a message to me, that I am getting through those bits and getting to the other side, which is ultimately everyone's goal. So that was the main points of that dream. There was one other bit that kind of came to me, which I wanted to mention, which was also to do with I'm just going to quickly read it. It's Luke 21, 34 to 36. But I'm going to read just a little bit before it, if I can find it. 21, 34, 34. Yeah, so this is, Jesus talking about what the end times are going to be like, what to expect. And he says, and it talks, actually, I'll start slightly earlier on verse 29. So, was that Luke 21, verse 29. So this is Jesus talking. So he told them, as in Jesus told them, this parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. When they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life. And that day will close upon you suddenly like a trap, for it will come on all those who live on the face of the whole earth. Be always on the watch and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen, and that you may be able to stand before the Son of Man. So it was purely because I was thinking of the trap closing suddenly on you. So these are obviously the people that, where I would suggest, it's talk. Well, let's do the generation, the fig generation bit first. So when it was talking about the fig generation, the fig tree is representative of the Jews, always, as far as I know, always. And so the fig generation is the generation that sees, seeing the fig tree sprout leaves is a way of describing, when the Jewish nation is restored. So when the Jewish nation is restored, when you see that happening, then this generation that sees this happen will not pass away before I come. So obviously that happened in 1948, I believe. So the generation born overnight after 1948 should be the generation that will see Jesus return. So we are that generation. We are the last generation. And a generation, there is no specific number, I don't think, on generation, because they talk about it many, many times. And obviously a generation is just dependent on how quickly people are having children. So it could be 20 years, could be 30, could be 40, all that kind of stuff. So I believe that it's coming very, very soon, personally. But the reason I included that bit, as I said, it was more to do with it closing in on like a trap, because obviously it's going to come suddenly. That's the idea of a trap, isn't it? It comes suddenly and you've got no way of escaping. And that's what made me think about, obviously, this haunted house. Everybody's just going around, they're all doing their own thing, they're having loads of fun. Thinking that, I guess they've got all the time in the world, and they haven't, obviously, and this trap just suddenly closes. In this particular one, it's obviously this ride you go on to, and that's it. As soon as you're in, you're in. You're not getting out alive. There is no way out that you'll be able to find. There is only one way, and that one way is that narrow door, or the only door that you can use, which of course is Jesus. So that's where I'll leave things. A little bit of a sort of evangelistic bit towards the end there, a little bit of scripture. I'm just going to try and put scripture in more if I can into the videos. That's something that I wanted to do, and some more evangelistic things, obviously, to talk, to ease people into eventually, obviously, giving their life to Jesus and making sure that you are not one of these who is left trapped on earth. With the escape of the rapture being gone, being completely gone, and then you're here for the duration, which is going to be another 7 years probably of hell on earth. I mean, that's literally what it's going to be like. Hell's going to be a lot worse, but what I mean is the whole tribulation of 7 years is really God showing trying to shake everybody up and just say, look, come on, you know there's a God. It's obvious. Look at the things that are happening around you. This is not natural. So there's going to be things that are completely insane that will happen to wake everybody up. Anyway, sorry, this is a very, very long one. Thanks for your attention. Hopefully it was interesting. Hopefully it was a good lesson. A lot of these dreams don't necessarily have lessons to them, but I would have said this was an evangelistic sort of one. So it was basically, as I said, me sort of saying that the kind of parting words I would say is, what worried me about this was we'd just come off, we'd escaped. Okay, we then wandered back down into the theme park. The dream ended, but we were kind of wandering around for a little bit, looking for other rides to go onto. I just thought, what are we doing? And it just made me think of, we haven't told anybody, we're not telling people about this being a trap. We were still letting people go in. We weren't standing at the entrance to this gate and saying, don't go in, and it felt like an evangelistic thing of, I don't think we're speaking to people enough. I don't think I'm speaking to people enough about the fact that, well, as I said, this life is just so incredibly temporary, so incredibly short, and that we need to actually speak to people and warn them and show them the exit. Okay, so that's basically what that one was all about. Okay, thanks for your time.